This past Thursday morning, 2 trees fell on my car. It was parked right out front. It's a spot I like usually because of the shade the tree provides, but turned out not to be the right choice. Surveying the damage, I noticed that had I parked just one spot to the right, my car would have been entirely untouched. I would have thanked God. I would have then forgot about it. I would not be telling you about it now. And if I had parked just one spot to the left, my car would have been entirely undrivable, not merely dented and scratched up. It would have been totaled, absolutely. And of course, one of my first thoughts, what is God trying to tell me, trying to tell us? That tree falls on the rabbi's car less than a week before Rosh Hashanah. Us Jews, we live on a precarious edge. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, v'yom tzom kippur yechatemun. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed. Who will live and who will die? Who will know tranquility and who will know torment? A little bit to the right, apples and honey, family around the table, gratitude for the blessings that God has blessed us with, our bounty. A little bit to the left, sadness and despair, uncertainty about the future, fear, heartbreak, when we look and see our loved ones missing from our table. The call of the shofar is both a cry of joy and also a cry of pain. It is a call both to look inward and to turn towards the path of tshuva, of repentance, and also a call to look outward, to stand upright, to show vigilance as we face an uncertain world. Many of you know this summer, my wife and I and our children were in Israel. And we were in the city of Tzfat, in the old city there, guided by one of my longtime friends who made Aliyah 18 years ago. Those of you who were with Charlene and me on our congregational mission to Israel 2 years ago remember meeting my friend Adam. And Adam is guiding us through this mystical mountainside, this labyrinth of stairs and pathways. And he turns to my kids and he says, think about your dad's synagogue. There are just about 1,200 families, Jewish families, that live in the old city of Tzfat. How many synagogues do you think they need to support all those families? And my kids know that Or Zion has just under 600 families that we serve. And they do the math, 1,200 divided by 600 is 2. My son pops up, 2, he says. Adam responds, would you believe there's actually more than 50? To which my younger son pipes up without missing a beat, that's a lot of guards. My friend Adam has been in Israel for nearly 2 decades. He has no idea what my son Beck is talking about. So Charlene and I begin to explain how Jewish institutions in America all have security. How Beck, who was not yet 2 years old at the time of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, cannot remember a time in his life where he has gone into a Jewish space and not seen guards. And eventually Adam gets it, and he explains to us that actually in the city of Tzfat almost everyone is Jewish, that there aren't the same kind of concerns there as we face here, and that none of these 50 congregations in the old city have security the way that we're accustomed to. And then he goes on to say, it reminds me of when my daughter was in the States at a summer camp for the first time here. And one of the first things she asks is, where's the bomb shelter? Where do I go if there's a siren? and is shocked to discover that here in the United States, our Jewish summer camps are not equipped with bomb shelters. Because of course in Israel, growing up, with missiles and rockets coming in from Hamas and Hezbollah, from Iran and the Houthis, it's only natural. Every child knows when they're in a new place, you need to ask right away, where is it that I go when the siren sounds? And in the same way that she was shocked to discover that the measures that she is accustomed to for security don't exist here, my son was shocked to discover that the measures that exist here for security don't exist there. But tragically, we live in a world where we need bomb shelters everywhere in Israel. In a world where we need security at every Jewish institution in America and in most places outside of Israel. There is not a place in the entire world where Jews do not have to modify their communal or living circumstances in order to mitigate threats to the community motivated by baseless hatred and bigotry. We have these measures in place so that when the tree falls, hopefully, we just get scratched. This year, we lost Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, 20-something peace workers who were gunned down as they left the Washington Jewish Museum. We lost Karen Diamond, an 82-year-old Holocaust survivor who was demonstrating in Boulder to bring attention to our captives at the time that a Molotov cocktail was thrown at her, causing injuries that took her life. We see mobs celebrating and glorifying violence against Jews throughout the world. In Sydney, and Amsterdam, and Santa Monica. We see it on campus, from Harvard to Columbia, to my alma mater, shamefully UCLA, to here in Arizona. We see it in boardrooms. We see it in convention halls. We see it in online chat rooms. We see it everywhere we look. From the Toronto International Film Festival to the NEA, the largest union in this country, to the Emmy stage last week, to the conspiracies suggesting somehow that Israel or the Jewish people were behind the horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk. We see it in mainstream media, on the TikTok algorithm. We see it at the United Nations. We see it in schoolyard taunts, bigoted slurs, small business boycotts. We see it even in emojis, where the watermelon and the red triangle have become the new swastika. We see it nearly everywhere we look. Anti-Semitism. The thousands-year-long smear campaign to defame the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism functions through the spread and repetition of libels, dishonest, defamatory statements that are shared with the intent or effect of demonizing Jews. Libel works because whenever any person says anything, it raises the possibility in our minds that it could be true. And so if you want to construct a particular people as wicked, as evil, as inherently suspicious, you don't have to prove that anything that you say is true. You just have to say it enough that people make that association in their mind. And from the moment they hear the word, they think from the most negative light. They think with suspicion. Hate fills their hearts. It's like the relatively unknown politician who's asked in a public forum, so how long have you been beating your spouse? It doesn't matter that they're not married, right? Drawing attention, responding in any way, it doesn't move the needle. In fact, the more that it's talked about, the more the association is fortified between the wrongly accused and the accusation. And it feels for us that it's getting worse right now. And I want you to know that for the vast majority of Jewish history, what our ancestors endured because they were Jewish, and proudly so, was actually far worse than what we experience now. But even so, there are cycles when it comes to anti-Semitism, and I want you to know that this is not the first time that a period of what feels like relative acceptance has been disrupted, as we've seen the balloon popped since October 7th and what we've seen following. In the mid-1800s, emancipation and Enlightenment thinking spread through Europe. Ghetto walls came tumbling down figuratively and literally. Jews had different kinds of opportunities for the first time that they had never had before. There was still a strain of Judenhass, as it was known at that time, anti-Jewish hatred, mostly among those who were less educated, mostly among those who were more religious. And the elites of that day mocked their Judenhass as passé, as lowbrow. I would never be a Jew hater. But then in 1879, Wilhelm Marr rebranded Judenhass as anti-Semitism. He said, we have no problem with the Jewish religion. It's the Jewish race. They're a Mongol race. They're an evil people. They are polluting the blood of Europe, of Germany. We must stand against them. And the elites ate it up. They ate it up. In a very short period of time, it was considered the pinnacle of society, evidence of discerning judgment, of commitment to justice and righteousness, to affiliate with Marr's League of Anti-Semites, an organization that he founded to stand against the Jews for the good of Germany. We all know where this led. Today, fortunately, the sins of the Holocaust are rather well known. And most mainstream organizations and institutions and individuals, when they encounter someone who espouses Nazi ideology, condemns and disavows them. But there is a new posh rebrand of the world's oldest hatred that elites buy into right now. The movement to denigrate and defame the Jewish people no longer calls itself anti-Semitism. It calls itself anti-Zionism. I want to clarify that anti-Zionism did mean something else long ago. It also meant something else, which is that there was an inter-Jewish debate about the ideas and thought of Theodor Herzl, and whether it was better to invest in communities like Tel Aviv or Degania, or to invest in communities where Jews already were and where the imagined Jewish future would be, in places like Cincinnati and Warsaw. And then that debate was resolved because in 1924, the United States first turned against immigrants and closed off immigration to destitute Jews fleeing anti-Semitism. And the only best last hope for the Jewish people was to head to the Yishuv, to pre-state Israel, where they were able to make a life. I want to also clarify the criticism of the Israeli government, of its policies, that emotion, concern, when we see the images coming out of Gaza and having empathy, is not anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. Though expecting a Jewish person for social acceptance to either disavow or explain those images or those policies absolutely is. Anti-Semitism brands itself as political discourse and not a hate movement. But anti-Zionism brands itself as political discourse, as just a political opinion. It brands itself saying, we're looking at this bilateral dispute in the Middle East and we're coming with an objective judgment, you'll notice always, against the Jews. Anti-Zionism claims to be about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, but it is not at all. Anti-Zionism is not concerned with Netanyahu or the right wing, because the fact that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Israelis have protested this government this year means nothing to them. Anti-Zionism is not concerned with the welfare of Gazans. And we know this because they stand with Hamas, which brutally attacks and murders Palestinian dissidents, which steals food aid intended for them in a time of hunger to enrich themselves, which has the largest tunnel system, that is to say, bomb shelter system in the world, and does not open it to innocents, and does everything it can to maximize civilian casualties. None of those things are in any way pro-Palestinian. Anti-Zionism seeks to defame and denigrate the Jewish people and is only concerned with Palestinian suffering when it can be weaponized to that purpose. You know, the first time people were saying, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, it was in Imperial Russia and then in the early Soviet period. The Zionists that they were objecting to were not Theodor Herzl or any other person who called themselves a Zionist. The Zionists that they were talking about are the people they read about, the caricatures, in the 1903 forgery, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a book that purported to be minutes of a secret meeting of a Jewish cabal planning world domination. And so begins the conspiracy of the international Zionist, a rootless cosmopolitan, a boogeyman whose treachery is the reason for all your suffering, all of your failures. This is what was spread through the Soviet Union and through Russia. And of course, though originally this was distributed to scapegoat an innocent people for the failures of a government, over the generations, that government came to believe their own lies. In 1967, when Israel soundly defeated Soviet-trained Arab armies with Soviet arms during the Six-Day War, the only rational explanation that the Soviets could come up with was that it was the international Zionists, that their betrayal of the global left, that their betrayal of the Iron Curtain, of the Soviet sphere of influence, was the cause of Israel's success. And so they began publishing pamphlets, thousands of them, translated into dozens of different languages, pamphlets that introduced statements and slogans like, Zionism is racism, Israel is an apartheid state. Statements designed so that a person reading them could think, if I've ever been discriminated against, it's the Jews, it's the Zionists. Statements like, America is controlled by the Zionists. And conversely, and ironically, contradictorily, Israel is a puppet of the American imperialism. What was the message? Whatever it is that you've been inculcated to hate about the West, about the United States, about capitalism in this communist society, it's the Zionists, it's the Jews behind it. And of course, most wickedly and disturbingly, this claim. Zionists are Nazis. Israel is committing genocide. Remember that the Soviets fought against the Nazis in World War II. That before the Cold War, they were aligned with the Allies. And even though Soviet society was deeply anti-Semitic, being called a Nazi is still being called the worst of the worst. And the purpose of claiming genocide and projecting that onto Israel then as now, was in order that individuals moved by this propaganda would believe that it is just and righteous to murder Zionists. Because after all, that's how you stop a genocide. It's why there's so much concern and so much repetition with the genocide libel today. It's a deliberate response to the Holocaust, seeking to invert it, to claim and place the victims of genocide as the perpetrators, to recast Israel and Jews, Zionists as the new Nazis, Palestinians as the new Jews, and in doing so, You can evade the obligations of Holocaust memory. You can ridicule the Jewish genuine need for self-defense. You can reclaim the world's oldest hatred, rebranded now as a form of liberation and justice. We see this also in the way that anti-Zionism approaches October 7th. It's not the genocidal actions of the Hamas terrorists who attacked and murdered and violated Jews. The crime on October 7th, in their mind, is the very existence of a Jewish state, which invites that resistance. It's awful. We see it in the way in which public figures today are pressured from the anti-Zionist mob to declare Israel is committing genocide. And when they do, the way in which they are lauded and celebrated. We see it in the way in which international institutions, the way in which non-governmental organizations, the way in which academics keep redefining what genocide is in order to try to fit that round peg in the square hole that doesn't fit, and make the claim that the war in Gaza, the war to root out Hamas, is somehow a genocide. We see it in the way that other conflicts throughout the world get none of the same attention, even where, in fact, there are genocides happening, and where death tolls of innocent civilians, of children starving, are 10 times the highest estimates that are exaggerated by the Gazan Health Ministry, which is an arm of Hamas and seeks to exaggerate the casualties of the current war. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is not so democratic, in the Sudan, in Yemen, in Syria, with the Uyghurs in Myanmar, the Uyghurs in China, with the Rohingya in Myanmar, with Putin's assault on Ukraine, with concentration camps in North Korea, not to mention the clear genocidal intent of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is obvious that all of what we hear demonizing and speaking about justice and about genocide is actually a campaign to defame the Jewish people. It's not a commitment to real justice, because if it were, this would not be so. And Jews get caught up in it too, but it won't work out well for them either. You know, in the Purim story, Mordechai tells Esther, "Don't think that because you're in the king's palace, you will be spared of all Jews of this decree." Mordechai, the book of Esther, was teaching us something about being in spaces surrounded by those who hate us. That even those Jews who are attracted to groups like Jewish Voices for Peace, even that Jew who stands on the Emmy stage and shouts, "Free Palestine," there is no amount of self-erasure, no amount of debasement, no amount of tokenization and covering and saying, I say this as a Jew, that will ever be enough to be fully accepted in a community dedicated to Israel's destruction, to our demise as a people. Hannah Arendt taught that ideology becomes truly dangerous, that totalitarianism emerges when alternative thoughts become unthinkable, when groupthink becomes so strong that the very idea that somebody disagrees becomes illegible to those that are part of a community. This has already begun to happen in academia, in the university system, in the arts, in many activist spaces, in journalist spaces. And it's an attack not only on the Jewish people, but fundamentally on Judaism, because when you look at the Talmud, on every page there is disagreement. That the rabbis valued diversity of perspectives and opinions and ideas. It's one of the reasons that the Jewish people has always valued our First Amendment protections in this nation. The freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom of religion, and that we understand as a community that whenever those freedoms begin to be curbed, that is dangerous for us as a people and for the world. And unfortunately, we see now in too many spaces, even the suggestion, even pushing back on the idea that what is happening in Gaza may not be a genocide, results in professional exclusion, results in character assassination, and in some cases results in physical threats. And it's ironic because these spaces, education, journalism, organizing garment workers, Hollywood, were places that Jews first found their place in American culture, and now the consensus practically is to condemn the Jewish people in Israel. It's far from our first time feeling on the outside. A week ago, today, we lost a giant when Robert Redford passed away. Redford, a prolific filmmaker, an impressive actor, grew up in Southern California in a mostly Hispanic community. His dad was the milkman. He shared a decade ago about this story, this memory, in an interview with the AARP. He was in the 3rd grade, and World War II was on its last legs. And he remembers that whispers started going about through the halls of his classrooms, and everyone was talking about who's Jewish and who's not. And being Jewish in that conversation was not a good thing. People were using nasty words to describe Jews. And he remembers sitting in his 3rd grade classroom and one of his friends, Lois Levinson, standing up in her chair and saying, "I'm Lois Levinson. I'm Jewish, and I'm very proud of it." The whole class gasped. He remembers going home and telling his parents about what happened. He asks his dad, "Dad, what am I? If Lois Levinson is Jewish, what am I?" His dad thinks for a moment and says, "You're Jewish and you should be very proud of it." For clarity, Robert Redford was not Jewish. He goes to his room and he starts crying. He's sobbing on the bed. And he can overhear his mom saying, "Charlie, go explain." And his dad comes in. And he says to him, "What happened today at school was unfair. Really, we're all the same." Robert Redford shared that story as a turning point in his life and in the direction of his work, that he said whenever he saw someone being discriminated against because of their background, because of their faith, because of their religion, that is faith, because of their gender, because of their race, that he felt a sense of how wrong that discrimination is. He said it even extended to when he'd be picking teams at school for sports, and he'd see somebody who wasn't the most coordinated, and they'd be squirming and worrying about being picked last. And he said he always picked those kids. Then he was upset when they didn't perform well, but he always picked them. My son Archer started middle school this year. By the way, his bar mitzvah will be December 20th, Shabbat of Hanukkah, and you are all getting invitations. Archer goes to a public school, with 900 other 7th and 8th graders. And I was picking him up from school about a week in, and I noticed that he was wearing a yarmulke on his head. And I want you to know, in Judaism, it's traditional to wear a yarmulke, to wear a kippah, a head covering, when we're in prayer, when we're making a blessing, when we're studying Torah. But it is not an obligation, and we have never obligated or expected our kids, certainly in public school, to wear a yarmulke. So I was surprised by this. And I turned to my son and I asked him what it's about. And Archer explains to me, it's just been the first week of school at this point, that in every class, they do some sort of exercise where they share about what they did over the past summer, or share something about themselves that's meaningful, or draw a picture of a few things that are important in their lives. And after drawing pictures of Israeli flags and stars of David, that after sharing with his classmates about running to the shelter while we were in Israel this summer, he didn't want to hide. He wanted everyone to know, this is who I am. I am Jewish. And I think of him doing this, him wearing a kippah, just like I think of Lois Levinson standing up in Robert Redford's class and saying, I am Jewish, and I am very proud of it. It's a message to all the other Jews out there that we're not alone. It's a message to all of the people who would denigrate Jews to say, we are here and we are unafraid. We are very proud of who we are. Rabbi Micah Kaplan, of blessed memory, led this congregation for years with love, deep Jewish pride, with distinction. He shared that with so many of us. He would always, on Rosh Hashanah, send you home with a gift to hammer in the message of his sermon, a sermon favor, if you will. And one of the ways in which I honor his legacy and his memory is by continuing that practice. So when you leave today, all of you can take home with you a necklace with a Jewish star. I know some of you, I want you to know, by the way, that this is for all of you, and that if you're here listening to me, it's because you've cast your lot with the Jewish people. I know some of you will be wearing a Jewish star necklace before you walk out of these doors. I know others will take it home and put it somewhere for another day, maybe look at it. Sometimes you'll wear it out and proud for everyone to see, and other times you'll tuck it in close to your heart so that you're always reminded of who you really are, who we are, what it means to be a Jew. That when you look at it, that when others see it, they will know, I am Jewish and I am proud. They will know, you will know, and be able sometimes to see, and I have to say, sometimes we're the ones that need to be reminded most. Be reminded of who we really are. Ani Yehudi, I am a Jew. I am a Jew who is proud. I am a Jew who is unafraid. I am a Jew who stands tall in the face of all the challenges that surround us. When we chose the theme for these holidays, Ani Yehudi, I am a Jew, I was mindful of the final words of Daniel Pearl, the Jewish journalist who was murdered by terrorists in 2002, less than a year after 9/11. He turned to the camera minutes before he was killed. He said, my mother is Jewish, my father is Jewish, I am Jewish. He did so unafraid, he did so with pride. I met Daniel Pearl's parents just a couple months after that. I was a college freshman. His dad was a professor. We sat together in the sukkah, and they shared about their son, about his commitment to justice and standing up for those who have no one to stand up for them, his love of Judaism, his love of his family. We didn't talk about how he died. But it's fitting that it was in the sukkah, because the sukkah is a place of vulnerability. The sukkah, the huts that we dwell in as Jews during the holiday of Sukkot, which starts 2 weeks from today, are by design temporary structures. They go up and they come down. The roof is made of branches. A branch can fall with a little bit of wind or rain. You feel the heat in there, but also the shade protecting you. But the truth is, I've had my sukkah with a big storm just blow away. And when you're in the sukkah, you know it can all fall down. It fell on Ruth and Yehuda when their son Danny was stolen from us and was murdered by Al-Qaeda. It fell on the people Israel, on the hostage families, on all of us, when nearly 2 years ago, Hamas breached our borders and abducted 251 souls from southern Israel and murdered 1,194 innocents. 48 still remain in Gaza. God, we pray to you that they come home soon. It's fallen on the Jewish people again and again and again and again. And we have gotten back up. We have rebuilt after every pogrom, every inquisition, every Holocaust, every crusade, we rise up and we rebuild despite the broken pieces. It's challenging, but we see Harachaman hu yakim lanu et sukkot David hanofalet. May the merciful one lift up the fallen sukkah of David. May God lift us up when it's hard to stand tall. May God give us strength in a world where there are too many who denigrate and demonize, who spread libel and construct conspiracy, too many who tell a story about us that we know is not ours and is not true. When we are pushed down, God lifts us up. We are Jews who will not cower. We are Jews who will stand proud. We are Jews who, despite all the challenges of the world, proudly share our story. We proudly declare, Ani Yehudi. We proudly declare, Am Yisrael Chai. Shana Tova.